Hi and welcome to Best in Tesla. We can never accept this, and if we don't accept it, it won't happen. This statement came from a leading official of the European carmakers umbrella organization, referring to the limiting CO2 emissions from new cars back in 2005. In retrospect, it's hard to even imagine anyone could say such a thing in the 21st century, but for Europe's powerful car industry, this attitude was normal. What he didn't know was those old certainties were changing fast. Within a year from that statement, his industry's control over legislation would be falling apart. And now we have the new 2025 CO2 emission targets hitting the legacy automakers once again. But this has been in the works for more than 30 years. Legacy automakers has been fighting against it for 30 years. So here is a little insight to the very dark past of the legacy automakers revealed by Transport and Environment. So let's check it all out and let's dive right in. So the old legacy automakers has been fighting against European emission standard for decades. They have been caught lying and cheating multiple times, and it even continues to this day. So I would like to show you a little bit of history seen through the eyes of Transport and Environment, T&E, an European NGO that has been fighting against legacy automakers for more than 30 years to get them to lower their emission from their cars, because as you will see, 60 years of progress from legacy automakers are no progress at all, as Transport and Environment has great insight to this battle. The European automakers was untouchable here in Europe, but they also sold cars globally, and the US Environment Protection Agency, EPA, really showed off the legacy automakers' true colors, and the European legacy automakers did no longer have immunity, and their house of cards was collapsing. They still fight and cheat to this day, as you will see in this video, and they are not ramping up EVs as fast as they can and want to make you believe. They are ramping up exactly as fast as they are forced to do, not 1 inch more. And here in 2025, they are forced to move a little further. Yes, the car industry has been lying and fighting against legislators for more than 30 years, and Transport and Environment, established back in 1988, has been one of the NGOs fighting against the car industry, trying to get the EU lawmakers to make mandatory standards for car CO2 emission. Transport and Environment made a whole book of their fight for cleaner emission cars, where they share a lot of details about how all of this went down. I will leave a link down below if you want to read it yourself. But to make it short, Transport and Environment was trying to get the car industry to accept an emission standard of 120 grams of CO2 emission per kilometers by 2012. Of course, the European car industry didn't want that, and though they were untouchable, which they pretty much were at the time, as in Europe, car makers were overseen by their friends in the National Transport Ministry. In reality, they were untouchable. So it was no coincidence that the Dieselgate broke out in the US. As Julia Polishkanova, Transport and Environment Senior Director, explained, the US Environmental Protection Agency has the power to test vehicles, and if there is a problem, they can impose huge fine on automakers. And that is exactly what happened for Volkswagen with their Dieselgate. EPA found out they were cheating and lying deliberately. They created software to cheat, so they didn't have to lower their emission on their cars, because the car industry insisted all the way back in 1996 it was not feasible to make cars that consumed less than 5 liters per 100 kilometers, at which point Greenpeace unveiled its re-engineered version of the Renault Twingo, which could travel 100 kilometers on 3 liters of petrol. The car makers had to admit the obstacle was not technological, but yet they did Nothing. Just look at the efficiency of the Volkswagen Beetle from 1948. It was 7.5 liters per 100 kilometers. And in 2008, the Beetle's efficiency was 7.5 liters per 100 kilometers. Yes, they didn't even care to try to make their cars more efficient. 60 years of progress was no progress at all. But after fighting against the auto industry that didn't want to make their cars less polluting, and when the law came forcing them to do so, they were cheating with emission tests. And Volkswagen's Dieselgate was a big turning point for this whole fight to lower the emission of our transportation. Because as former Director of Transport and Environment Joe Ding said, that told me that as long as car has an exhaust pipe, the car makers will always find a way to cheat. Take away the exhaust pipe and they can't cheat. It was clear that if we wanted to be serious about tackling climate emission from road transport, we had to push for a transition to electric. Yes, because this had not really been on Transport and Environment's agenda before. They had been fighting for 25 years to get lawmakers to put a mandatory CO2 emission standard, with some success. But Dieselgate, together with the emerge of electric cars like Tesla's Model S that came out in 2012, showed this was possible. As Joe Ding also said, wind and solar prices were dropping, and by 2015 most new power was wind and solar. Cars like the Nissan Leaf, the BMW i3 and Tesla's Model S suggested that electric cars could be more than just a niche, especially if battery prices kept coming down, which they did and are still doing. So we started to run the numbers and debate it within the organization, and soon it became clear we needed a new strategy. And this was the moment when the laws that we have officially got today started to take shape. The European politicians could also start to see that the European automakers were investing 7 times more money in producing EVs in China than in Europe, because China was starting the shift to EVs, and there was no incentive, or rather law, forcing them to make them in the EU at that point. And as Joe Ding continued, this was key in convincing the EU lawmakers to accept a higher 2030 target of 37.5% less CO2 emission, much to the dismay of the auto CEOs. The European Commission presented a law requiring a 55% emission reduction from new cars between 2021 to 2030, as well as the goal of no CO2 emission per kilometers by 2035. But in 2020, a new target was approved, set a fleet-wide target of 95 grams of CO2 per kilometer for the year 2020 to 2024. That is pretty much only possible if you make EVs, as no one has ICE cars that are that efficient. But as you can see on this little chart of car makers, they only just applied to the targets, and we can see the Volkswagen did miss the target by 0.5 gram per kilometers driven in 2020. And that little miss cost them over 100 million euros in penalties. And remember, Tesla still in 2024 earned more than $2.7 billion in regulatory credit, something many Wall Street analysts said would go away very soon, all the way back in 2018. So they thought the legacy automakers would ramp up much faster than they did. So if some of these automakers were not able to buy CO2 credits for someone like Tesla, they would not even be below the little green dot on this chart. So we can see on this list here, they make just enough not to get fines, and that is it, because they lose money on every EV they sell. So they don't want to make too many, but if they don't sell any EVs, they will not get to the CO2 target and get even bigger fines. So they only do as much as they are forced to do. And we have been able to see that with Volkswagen. They ramped up very fast in 2020 and 2021, and everyone thought that would just continue. And that is why someone like Bloomberg thought that Volkswagen would just sell more EVs than Tesla in 2024. But that did not happen. They sold less than half of what Tesla did in 2024, because since they ramped up last time, they have basically been going sideways, only waiting for the new targets here in 2025. So this this is the year we will see them ramp up again, as now there are new emission standards they have to get to. And because Volkswagen stopped their ramp of EVs, they are now so far behind they will probably not be able to make it without pooling together with pure EV players. Yes, the competition did come, but painfully slow. It must be very painful just handing over hundreds of millions of dollars to their competitor Tesla because they can't keep up. And in 2025, not only are the emission targets going to be stricter, but hybrids will also have lost some of their utility factor. So someone like Toyota, that has 68% of their sales in Europe being hybrids, will have to suddenly sell a lot more EVs to comply. But it is not only CO2 emission and climate change. The pollution of the air we breathe is the most concerning aspect of them all. Air pollution causes an estimated 400,000 premature deaths every year here in Europe. And due to the air pollution's negative effect on health, costs tens of billions of dollars in health cost. Poor air quality disproportionately impact low-income households and minorities. Road transport is a major cause of toxic air right across Europe. But the legacy automakers just don't care. They don't want to do what is needed because it will cost them money. Just look at the 60 years of progress from Volkswagen to make their cars more efficient to help us all breathe cleaner air. Yeah, there was no progress for 60 years. Yes, the industry has a long history of cheating regulations, the Dieselgate scandal being just one of the most prominent cases. It also had a history of overinflating emission compliance costs, while the actual cost of adding better emission control technology are not prohibitive. The European Commission estimates that toxic emission can be slashed at very low cost in the region of 100 to 500 euro increase per car depending on the stringency of the emission standard, less than a paint upgrade on an entry-level car model such as the Volkswagen Golf. So by opposing these stricter CO2 emissions, as the car makers did, car manufacturers are sending a clear signal that they prioritize profits over people's health. They don't care about CO2 emission and toxic gas that their products are sending out, only in advertising. They have shown that pretty clear over the last 30 years and are still cheating. Since the early days of the first Euro pollution standard, the car industry has claimed that emission limits are not feasible, lobbying to weaken or delay them. Daimler, Volkswagen, BMW, Audi and Porsche went as far as illegally colluding to delay the development and use of selective catalytic reductions, or SCR, emission control technology, to reduce toxic NOx emission. Despite the maturity, they were fined almost 1 billion euros by the Commission for collusion to delay emission reductions and held back the development of technology that could have reduced harmful emission from their vehicles. And that was in 2019, 4 years after Dieselgate. Yes, transport and environment and many others have fought against this for 30 years. The legacy automakers have been caught lying and cheating again and again and again. And it was not just Volkswagen. And when it comes to EVs, they have been all talk and no action. And as I've showed in this video, we now know why that is. They don't really want to make EVs, but they would like you to think that they do. And there will be a lot of talk again here in 2025 as their EV will grow again, but that will all be because they are forced to do so, not because they want to. It's not like Tesla that has done no harm, but are the one being attacked right now, and their whole mission is to accelerate the transition to a sustainable future. And if it wasn't for Tesla, the old boys would hardly be making EVs today. Just think back at all the promises that Volkswagen or Ford or GM said that they would have caught up with Tesla by now, and they are nowhere near. But in the meantime, BYD has rised up and become a true competitor to Tesla, overtaking the legacy automakers and their many claims of what they would do, while BYD was just executing. They came out of nowhere. Any one of the legacy automakers could have done the same as BYD, but they chose not to. as this would have hurt their short-term profits. So I do feel sorry for the workers that have to be laid off at the many legacy automakers plant and their supply chain. But it's hard to feel sorry for the board members and leaders of these companies that has been deliberately lying and cheating to us all for their profits for decades. But there is a little girl called Karma, and the legacy automakers might get to know her a little bit better over the next couple of years. Good luck. And thank you for watching. And until next time, take care out there and be nice.